Here in lesson 2, we're going to talk about policies for your tutoring business, some things that you want to prepare families for in advance to help your tutoring relationship go as smoothly as possible. And we're going to start with a quote from a motivational speaker named Tony Gaskins. And he said, "You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you stop, and what you reinforce." So think about that when you are creating your policies. If you want to be treated with respect and as a professional, you'll think about setting policies that don't allow disrespect of your time and your resources, that encourage students and families to honor the process of tutoring and put in the work that's needed, and reinforce them for things like showing up on time and maintaining a regular schedule and paying you on time. So you are going to create policies that won't leave anyone feeling bad. They're just the way you do business, and they set you and your students and their families up for success and comfort. Your policies are going to save you time and money. They'll set a professional tone for your relationship and your business, and they'll let you focus on instruction with your students. One of the first things that you may want to consider in creating your policies document is how you're going to handle cancellations. Some questions to answer are, how much notice do you need for cancellations? If you are going into an office to host your sessions, you might want more notice than me. I go into a room in my house. If you are arranging for childcare, or if you are rearranging responsibilities to be available for tutoring, you may need a different amount of notice than if you are an adult and you just have relationships with other adults to negotiate in the other parts of your day. So think about your own schedule. Think about what you would do, how you would spend the time if someone canceled. For me, if a student at the beginning of my day cancels, I am always happy to spend that extra time around the house. And if a student in the middle of the day cancels, it's not so bad because I get my lesson planning done, and I'm able to wrap up my day a little earlier. More than one cancellation in a day can certainly be frustrating, but I don't always mind them. They're okay sometimes. So it doesn't ruin anything for me when I have a cancellation, the way it did when I was on the road driving from family to family and would end up sitting in a parking lot in a park somewhere in the dark waiting to drive to my next session. Think about your own schedule and whether you're available to offer makeup sessions. I used to be able to do this. I had openings, my evening students, I had openings on other evenings of the week, and I could typically offer a makeup session within the next week. And I can't really do that anymore because of how full my schedule is. Also think about whether you're going to offer refunds or credits for unused sessions. So if the family cancels with plenty of notice their regular Tuesday session, will you give them a credit on their next invoice? Will you give them a refund by reversing a charge? Or will you just say like, oh, you paid for that session and you held that time? So that's up to you. Here's a screenshot of my policy on absences. There are a few parts here. One is I have the note that one absence per semester per term is credited in their equal payment plan. And that means if they have to cancel because they're sick or something unexpected comes up, they have already had that payment, that session payment deducted from their tuition payment. If they never do, they get a free session. Great. And then on the other hand, if I have to cancel a session, which very rarely happens, it's happened twice in the last year that I can think of, for either internet issues at my house or childcare issues. If I do have to cancel a session, I offer them the opportunity to make the session up, and I give them a few options, but unfortunately I don't have too many, or I let them choose to take a credit on next month's tuition. And then I do have a note here that if they are canceling in advance, they know a field trip is coming up, they know a family event is coming up, I am willing to reschedule if I can. And if the more notice they give me, the more likely I am to let them reschedule, and then they can save their sick credit for another time. No-shows are one of the more frustrating things as a tutor. And every time a student no-shows, I am able to take a deep breath and say, they paid in advance for these lessons. So it's frustrating and it doesn't help the student make progress. But on the other hand, it is not a stressor for me because I've already been paid for the session. So think about these things in terms of how you're going to handle the no-show. How long will you wait for a student if they don't show up? Typically, I wait about 5 to 8 minutes, depending on the student. And if they haven't shown up and they haven't contacted me, I will text or email or call the family, depending on what is the best fit for them, and check in. If it's a teenage student, I have permission from a lot of parents to text them directly. A lot of times they are signing into the session on their own, and sometimes they need a reminder. Usually, if I do that, I send a text to the student, addressed to the student, hey, John, we're meeting right now. And I also send the same message to the parent so they are in the loop. The next thing to include in your policy document is your payment policies. This is all going to be based on what you decided in the last module, but here are the details. So when will you send out invoices? Is it the first of the month or the last week of the previous month, or do you send them always on Sundays or Fridays? When is payment expected? I usually put a 10-day window on my invoice because these are expected invoices. It's the same amount every month. So I give them a little time to, sit down and sort out their bills, but I don't give them a full 30 days like some providers do. You would note in your policies if you offer or even if you require automatic payments, and make a note about what will happen if the payment is late. At what point will you suspend sessions? Like if the payment has not been received by X date, or if the payment is more than X days late. My approach to this is a little bit informal. For the majority of my students, actually all my students currently pay monthly in advance. And so I will look at my Stripe account every week and determine if there are any outstanding invoices. If there are, I'll send parents an email with a copy of the invoice link and just say, I noticed this isn't paid. I just want to make sure you received it. I have not yet gotten to the point where I had to suspend sessions for non-payment. But that's something you need to consider. If the invoice becomes more than X weeks overdue, at what point will you pause seeing the student until the payment issue is resolved? Things happen, and often parents are just busy and unaware of the invoice, but make sure you're not putting yourself in a situation where you're owed a lot of money that you are not going to eventually get. Here's my payment policy. Payment is due on the first of every month. And I explain the equal payment system here. And so my invoices go out, and then I ask on my invoices, I ask that they be paid within 10 days. So that's my approach to the payment policy. As far as following up on missed payments, I do that a little more informally. I check in on Stripe once a week or so. And if I notice by the middle of the month that something hasn't been paid, or if a parent who almost always pays right away hasn't paid yet, I'll send them an email with a link to the invoice and saying, hey, just making sure you saw this invoice. This is for our sessions in the current month. Another element of your policies that will help parents feel more confident and comfortable and may save you some round and round emails and phone calls is noting what's the best way for parents to reach you. When I was tutoring and also teaching, I wasn't available to take parent calls during the day, but I could often find a moment to respond to parent emails on my prep or on my lunch. So I preferred email communication, and I would let parents know that, I'm available to return your calls in the after school and evening hours. Do you have a time frame? How promptly are you going to be able to get to parents? I have a statement that I will make every effort to respond to all emails within 24 hours. And I try. Sometimes they get by me. But that's my goal as far as parent communication. And another element to consider is how often you'll provide session updates and progress reports to parents. For most of my OG students, I send an email after each session because I'm often attaching practice for the family to continue at home. For some of my older students, my students working more independently, I might send that up, or students working on something that is where every lesson is sort of the same as we work through a skill like planning, writing, or editing. I'll send communication maybe once a week and just say, we're working on this graphic organizer, or we read an article about this, ask them what the main idea was. So it depends on the family. I periodically do informal assessments, and I note that in my statements and in my policies, and I say a short written report will be provided. Also, note in your policies whether you do provide written reports of your testing. For example, something in a format they could share with the school or share with an assessor. And you can decide whether you will communicate directly with schools, whether you are available to attend meetings when asked. This is something that hasn't been a problem for me with the families I've served. I have participated in one meeting with another tutor because we were working on similar skills. I have participated in periodic phone conversations with parents. I have been asked for written progress reports to be part of a homeschool portfolio, but this has not been something that has been a burden. In some cases, I think in some communities and with some individual families, the expectation for communicating with the school or attending meetings can be really overwhelming. So make sure to set in your policies whether you are willing to attend meetings, what your fee is for preparing a report or attending a meeting, and be prepared to give answers about those things because sometimes parents do ask. You can also note in your policy document what you expect kids and families to have available in terms of technology. Do you have device recommendations such as, will you work with a student who is only using a tablet? Do you require a computer? Do your lessons, the way you have set them up, work with Chromebooks, or do students have to have a Windows or Mac laptop? Do you require over-the-ear headphones or earbuds, or does it seem to work for your students to listen to the computer speakers? In my experience, hasn't been a challenge, but if you are finding that your students have poor connections, and some geographic areas this is more difficult. So if your students in your local area, some of them don't have sufficient internet speed, you may stipulate that they have to maintain a certain internet speed to work with you. Not that you may find that parents who don't have a strong internet connection or don't have the right technology aren't seeking out online tutoring in the first place. But every once in a while, I've had a situation where I've had to say, like, well, your home internet, it's just not supporting our meetings. We'll talk down the road about technology troubleshooting and what to do if you're finding that. You may also have in your expectations software that students need, have them download the Zoom app or have them download certain apps to an iPad. Do you require a document camera? Some tutors request that students have a document camera to work with them so that they can see their written work on the tape, like on the desk in front of them. So all of those different options can go into your policy document. My original tutoring policies was a one-page sheet with the name of my business on the top and a revision date in the footer at the bottom and a line asking parents to sign acknowledging that they had read them. That was where I started. Is that enforceable in any way? Who knows? I mean, I didn't set it up to be. They're not policies I've had reviewed by a lawyer. They're not policies that have ever been tested or challenged, really. But they're set up as the expectation for what we do. Now, if someone isn't following one of those policies, what do we do? That's our next question.